Hello, everyone. All right. How are you guys doing? Oh, I'm up there. Let me bring it down here. Okay. Anthony's here. Hello, Eddie. Hope you are doing okay. Long time. I have question about double and triple tonguing. To tongue, I was told to get air flowing. Just how do you do this? Because I seem to run out of fuel or air to keep it going. Um, yeah, so let me see. Let me analyze what you're saying. Double or triple tongue, I was told to get air flowing. Well, the problem is if you don't flow the air, there's nothing to move the tongue, right? You can make it go back and forth, but it's not going to be there won't be any notes coming out. The air has to flow. That's why, let me tell you about this. In my method, I tell people that the routine books, and that includes the daily routines, it includes the Chops Express, and it includes each of the Chops books. I tell everybody that those books are air exercises. Every exercise in the book is an air exercise. Okay, when you're doing the long tones, it's an air exercise. When you're doing the articulation, it's an air exercise. When you're doing multiple tongue, triple tongue, double tongue, those are air exercises. We're focusing primarily on the air delivery. So yes, we want that airflow, and we want our tongue to carve the notes out with the airflow. Now, if you're running out of air, it could possibly be that your oral cavity is too wide, too big, right? So if your oral cavity, let's say your oral cavity is here, you might blow out more, use your air less efficiently. Bring the oral cavity in. You need to bring it in anyway for the triple tongue, so that the tongue can, you know, try to do this. The tongue, if you're down here, the tongue has to go so far to do the back thing, right? If you're up here, it doesn't travel as far. Okay, so you do have to have the tongue higher in the mouth to do the uh, multiple tongue. It's not going to be, we're told so often that you have to have a real open embouchure, real open oral cavity. They want your jaw down and your tongue down. You can't triple tongue and double tongue like that properly. Okay, maybe that's what's happening. That it's possible that's what's happening. Here's someone, Omotayo. Hello, Omotayo. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Hello, just trust you're doing great. Yes, sir, I am. I have question about tonguing. Where do you think tongue placement should be in the mouth? Okay, so um, I had a great lesson one time with Charlie Geyer, and what one of the main things that I learned in that lesson was that there's different places for the tongue to go depending on the musical context. So, for example, when I'm playing salsa, I didn't play an introduction today because my lips are all beat up. I'm still. I had a gig last night, but that's not what did it to me. I had a 5 hour gig that started with 2 hours of brass trio music on Wednesday, and I'm still a little bit swollen up here. Okay, so let's say I'm playing a salsa chart, right? My tongue is all the way forward so that the if we were to say that these are the teeth, right? I'm pushing my tongue like this into the teeth so that I get a more percussive beginning on the note. If, however, I'm playing like a concert band piece, then my tongue is going to be pretty much close to the gum line. The gum line is where the teeth hit the gums, right? And I'm tonguing more like this. It's some people refer to it as feather dusting because just the tip of the tongue. Whereas the other one, I'm pushing all the way in. I'm pushing the tongue all the way in. Those are two extremely different ways to tongue. Neither one is correct. Neither one is incorrect. It has to do with context. Now I did have a conversation with someone who did. I think she called it anchor tonguing, and I said that's not for classical music. What I should have said, this was a conversation from the 90s, I think. What I should have said was that I would never do that on classical music because yeah, it must have been in the 90s because she asked me to call her and she would demonstrate classical music done with anchor tongue. So I and I'm the kind of guy, if you prove me wrong, I will accept that I'm wrong. Okay. Um, that doesn't make so what it reveals is that I spoke poorly. I should not have said thou shalt not, right? I should not have said it that way. I should have said with all these different tools at my disposal, I would not use that tongue for classical music because even if I could tongue classical this way, even if I could do that, it would never be as good as using. And I don't mean classical, all classical. I mean classical, like the symphonic band kind of classical. That's a very distinctive sound. And maybe it's true that some people can get that sound with that other tongue where it's all flat up into the teeth. Maybe they can. I don't think that's the best way to do it. I still don't think. She proved me wrong. I still don't think that's the best way to do it. So that's my basic answer. It's an almost a non-answer. Okay, it's almost a non-answer because it really does depend. You know what Charlie Geyer had me do was uh, tongue one note over and over again and move my tongue forward and backward to experience what the difference in the sound was. Right? I sped it up. What he wanted really was more repetitions on each different position, but I gave you an example, an exaggerated example right there. Um, so yes, I hope that answers your question. We Let me tell you my background before I had that lesson with Charlie Geyer. And I'm not blaming the teachers for this. I'm blaming my lack of understanding, okay? Um, I thought there was a correct way to tongue and everything else was incorrect. And the problem was every teacher I had gave me the impression that the way I was tonguing from the other teacher was wrong. And I would change it to this, I would change it to that according to what the teacher wanted. I have in my past, I have 7 long-term teachers. I consider long-term a year or more. Um, a lot of those teachers I had for much longer than 1 year. And, you know, it was really a big eye opener for Charlie Geyer to say, um, you know, none of those are wrong. It has to do mostly with appropriateness. Hello, Cardo. Nice to see you. He says, "Hi, Eddie. I hope you are doing well. Doing fine. Yes, sir, I am. Thank you. Could you please demonstrate some of your favorite pedal exercises or some of the most beneficial ones? Well, in terms of beneficial, I would, all of them are beneficial. Okay, I don't think there's a, and that's a good thing for me to demonstrate right now because I'm all puffy and everything. Pedal tones sound like a good thing to do to me. Okay, so let me tell you what I do like. I like to play from G down as pedals, right? So, and this isn't, I don't mean that I like this all the time. I mean, I like to do that as a pedal exercise, right? So even though we're not to the pedal register, you're already getting started with the pedals. And then I also like for the pedals to follow some sort of pattern. So, out of all the ones I've written so far, I think my favorite are the ones in the Chops Pro book. So let me get that. And I probably have it memorized, but let me just be safe and all right. I really like this exercise a lot. And it just goes down in half steps. It goes higher as it goes lower. So the ending is on a high note. Um anyway, I'll do one more. And like I said, I'm beat up today. Um, I have a little note on here to myself, something I discovered, and I know nobody asked about this, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. Um, as I go down into the pedal register, I have to keep telling myself that my embouchure is off center. There's times when I try to put it center, not center, but pointing straight. If you have an off-center mouthpiece placement, then the horn needs to face in the direction where you're off-center. If you have an off-center mouthpiece, but you're pointing straight, that's not going to work, okay? So I have an instruction there to remind me that as I go lower, I'm trying to put my horn a little bit more off to the side because otherwise I can't get those lowest notes. If I try to go straight, there's not enough pressure on the left side. Anyway, so all of the pedal tones are beneficial. Um, my favorite ones are the ones that are a little bit more melodically interesting. So instead of just arpeggios, instead of just um, you know, something that just sounds like an exercise, I like stuff that's more melodic. Gabriel, hello, Gabriel. Nice to see you. Anthony says, to keep the air going, don't stop the air. Right. Oh my, yes, of course. But the way we think about that, right, is that the air is flowing. That's the first priority. The air should just be flowing. Every time you pick up the horn to play, it should be flowing. So if that's the constant, if flowing air is the constant, then the adding double tongue and triple tongue to that is just a matter of shaping that air. I think it's a misconception to think that the note starts with the tongue. It's not really like that. The note is coming from down here. What we're doing with the tongue is shaping the note. Okay? We can control how the note is released in that airstream by the shape of our tongue, how hard we place it, and stuff like that. Omotayo says, "Thank you so much. Is there a way I could have a one-on-one class with you, sir?" Yes, of course. Um, Check out my website. I have a lesson area. I'll put a link on here. I have a private lesson area on my website, and it talks about lessons. Now, let me point out, and I don't know how bad this is. I'm going to point out that these two icons at the top of the page, one opens up to other icons, and I just don't know how many people actually see that. I wish I could share screen. If you go to this lesson page, the default is the information button that says about private lessons, and that's the one that has my bio. I think it looks like a bio. I wrote that years ago. Okay, if you click on the icon next to it, it's got like 4 different squares. If you click on that, now that bio is replaced with a bunch of icons. That's basically the lesson menu is under that other icon. And a lot of people don't know that. And in that icon list, I've got trumpet lesson prices, new student registration, trumpet lessons online, an article about virtual lessons, trumpet listening list, trumpet lesson videos, teaching philosophy outreach for schools, assignment recordings, success stories, like the people who have done well with my lessons, practice tests, trumpet articles, and frequently asked questions. People who don't click on that second icon aren't going to see those parts of the website. So I don't know how intuitive that is, um, but I just didn't want to clutter up the whole page. So I put that alternative icon on there so people could have access. But I don't know if anyone, even though I wrote, okay, maybe I didn't write. Let me see. Maybe I should put that in text and say, hey, if you want the trumpet menu, click on that icon or something. Anyway, so yes, if you follow that link, it'll take you to the information about the lessons. We have 2 different kinds of lessons. We have uh, ad hoc lessons, which are one-off, right? You pay for one lesson and there's no future commitment. Then we have weekly lessons. One thing people get confused, they want to do every other week. We don't have every other week. If you want every other week, you pay for ad hoc lessons instead of weekly lessons. And the reason for that is because it's the same thing. If I wouldn't, um, if I were, so all of these prices are calculated. They are not. They are not emotionally generated. The prices for the lessons are calculated, not emotionally generated. Um, and so the price for every other week lessons would be the same as ad hoc because that's what the calculation comes out to. It's the same price. So that's why we only have weekly lessons or ad hoc lessons. We don't have bi weekly lessons. Hello, Karen. Nice to see you. She says, "Hi, Ed. We got more Christmas music Wednesday and have a concert in 3 weeks. That's wonderful. I am trying to get familiar with it." There you go. I like that. I like that. You know, and it's just popped into my head, so I'm not necessarily addressing you specifically, Karen, but one thing I might forget sometimes to mention is that listening to the music is also, if you can find a recording of the pieces you're playing, listening to that is another way to add familiarity. It's a less painful way, right? So to speak. It's a less painful way to build familiarity. I just uh, wrote, just to keep you guys in the loop, right? I'm working on a pioneer version of the tonalizations. We published those before, but as a module, and I won't go into that right now. What I call a module before is not what I call a module today. Um, but yes, the um, the pioneer level tonalization studies hadn't been published as a book yet, and I've been working on that. And I'm writing an introduction that I think is important, even though it's going to be going mostly to beginners. I thought the introduction was important because if you can establish why the tonalization studies are so important at that first earliest stage, then they will build habits that will serve as a foundation for all the other stuff. In other words, playing trumpet's going to be a whole bunch easier if they have a good habit of practicing the tonalization studies on a regular basis and practicing them properly. And I went into what makes it proper um, in the book. But I also put a page worth of text about the accumulative method because everything that I teach is part of the accumulative philosophy of practicing. I call it the art of accumulative practicing. And now I'm going to start, I would like to anyway, I'm going to start adding a section on accumulative practice to every book as I write it to show how does this book fit into that. And anyway, so I was writing because what reminded me of this is Karen saying she's trying to get familiar with it. What reminded me of this is um, the accumulative method, the accumulative philosophy. What are we accumulating? We're accumulating familiarity, and in that, I talk about um, how, well, first of all, the contrast between perfection, striving for perfection, and striving for familiarity. When we strive for perfection, it's it's never good. It's got negative connotations from the very beginning. You can never achieve perfection. It's not possible. Um, in contrast, uh, when you build familiarity, that's something tangible. It's a lot more tangible than how close are you to perfection. You know, if if we draw a chart and if infinity is at the top of the chart and you're at 10,000, 10,000 units up to infinity, then you get to 100,000. How much closer are you to infinity? That's ridiculous, right? And that's how perfection works. Perfection is the infinity. We never get to perfection. But if we're looking back at what we've accumulated, the experiences that we accumulate, the familiarity we accumulate through those experiences, That's something that will continue to grow. And in the same sense, there's no limit to it. But it's a lot easier to measure in terms of how good you are. If we measure ourselves against perfection, we will always be terrible. But if we're measuring ourselves in terms of how familiar we are with a piece, with a technique, with a with the horn itself, with a genre, that's tangible because it's not feeling based. I hope that makes sense. So yes, one of the things that we do, and I just said it once already. One of the things that we do to increase this familiarity is listen to the music. Listening is a big part of familiarity. We listen to the song to become familiar with the song. We listen to the genre or the style to become familiar with the genre or style. We listen to trumpet players, great trumpet players, to become familiar with the trumpet. Stuff like that. It's a very powerful thing. Carlos says, Eddie, how long it usually takes you to recover from being beat up? Okay, that depends on how active I am in unbeating it up. Today I was lazy in unbeating it. Huh? So usually we're looking at the most 30 minutes of some low, slow practice. And what do I do? I pull out the pioneer routine. Actually, it's not the pioneer routine, is it? It's the because that doesn't exist yet. Well, actually, it does now, but what am I saying? The daily routine, the first routine in the daily routine book, it almost always fixes being beat up. It doesn't go past C. If you play it real slow, um, it's like getting a lip massage, and then you're ready to go. But what did I do today? Nothing, nothing at all. So I told you, I think I told you guys I had a 5 hour gig on Wednesday and then a jazz gig last night. And today so maybe what I'm saying is that my lips are beat up, but I'm also tired. Um, uh, I don't want to touch the horn today. That kind of tired. Karen says, I have recordings of most of the pieces. Find it easier to listen and then play. Trying to play along hasn't been working so well. Yeah, now you know what? The thing is, playing along is not necessary at this stage. The only time I recommend playing along with the album is after you've mastered the piece and you want to get used to the accompaniment and stuff like that. Um, it's not a practice tool for this stage of just learning the music. It's better to listen, 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 and then do some very slow practice. Hello, Gabriel. Nice to see you. Oh yes, you already I already said that. He says, Eddie, what mouthpiece would you recommend for the C trumpet, a deeper one or a standard one? I don't have any different approach to the C trumpet than I would for any other trumpet. Okay, so I would play the same three mouthpieces that I do on my B flat, depending on the context. Now, normally, let me talk in Warburton sizes right now. Um, Normally on the C trumpet for most things that would call for C trumpet, I would use the Warburton 2MC. 2MC is what I would use. So, which is basically a standard C cup. There are times now. Remember how I determine how shallow the cup is going to be. I determine it by according to how loud is the ensemble. So if I'm playing C trumpet With an ensemble that's extremely loud, I might use exactly this mouthpiece, which is a 2S, which is their shallow mouthpiece, um, with a New York backbore. If it's really, really loud, I would put this mouthpiece in. And that, people will say, well, that's a lead mouthpiece. It's not a lead mouthpiece, it's a shallow mouthpiece. But I can play low notes on it. Let me give a demonstration. If you can't play low on the mouthpiece, you shouldn't be playing on the mouthpiece. Anyway, I like that mouthpiece specifically because it has characteristics of a warm sound when I'm playing it by myself, right? It doesn't have that nasty shallow mouthpiece sound. It doesn't have the darkness of the sound that I like normally when I'm playing by myself. So that's why I use this other mouthpiece when I'm playing by myself. See, it has a much, almost a rounded sound compared to this more angular sound. Of course, that doesn't mean anything, right? So, so even on the C trumpet, I would still use the same approach. Now, what I do fully expect, because I don't have a C trumpet right now, but what I do fully expect is that I might have to have a different backbore. Now that I have access to these backbores and the whole mouthpiece kit, I could change that. I could sit here, try the horn, switch out the mouthpiece backbores. I would not change anything about the cups. I would not change the rim. Only the backbore for the C to make sure that it matches up, that so that what I have matches with the C. So Karen says, so practicing low is better than not playing when trying to recover. What about time off between sessions, like 50% rule? I'm a little confused. Let me read that again. Practicing low is better than not playing when trying to recover. You know what? I would probably say yes. That's probably true. Unless you're damaged, like if you've got cuts and stuff like that, it's probably better to let that heal. But for us professional players, we don't have a choice. And that's what I found works for me to get me ready for the next gig. If I had a hard night the night before, I've got a gig the next night. That's what works best for me, is to just do a lower routine. Okay. So now, what about time off between sessions? So that's the part I'm confused about. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking there. So time off between sessions. Are you saying instead of taking time, let's say you have two practice sessions in the day, and during the time in between, you play some low stuff instead of taking time off? Is that what you're suggesting? I wouldn't recommend that. No, I would not recommend that, if that's what you're saying. Kato says, I'm wondering how Miles Davis was able to cut through that ensemble in the 70s with all those electric instruments around. Okay. He was on a microphone. That changes everything. A lot of people don't know, don't understand, don't realize that when you're a jazz player, The microphone is part of your horn. Okay? The microphone is part of the instrument. You don't just do your thing and then let the sound guys try to capture it. It's your job to know where to put the microphone. So in his case, he had that battery pack thing, and then the mic was stationary inside of his bell. So no matter how he moved, and he didn't move like that. I'm just saying it wouldn't matter how much he moved. The mic was stationary in that whole time. So, um, and if I'm not mistaken, he was using effects on his sound too. I might be wrong about that, but I seem to remember him using some effects. Karen says, sometimes I'm still tired after I finish a routine and later come back to practice music. Yes, that's part of what we're shooting for. So now what you could do is start that second session off with some low Herbert L. Clark stuff or something, you know? Something like that. And then maybe go down in half steps just to get the lips loosened up a little bit. Gabriel says, Eddie, I'm studying a lot on the C trumpet and it seems to be harder than the B flat, especially in high notes. Is it me or the C is really harder? I've never had a C that played easier than a B flat. I think it's hard. I don't know how this works, right? Is it because we've got B flat ears and the C we're trying to play in the pitch with the B flat ears instead of C pitch? I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. So the E flat would be easier because some of those partials are going to be closer, right? Um, so I've had a suspicion about that all along, but my experience is that C trumpets are terrible. That's why I don't have one right now. I'm holding out for a Blackburn. I would love to have a Blackburn C trumpet someday. Um, the reason I don't have one now is because I don't play C trumpet gigs, and I think we mentioned this before in the Q and A. It doesn't make any sense to me to spend money on stuff that's not going to have an impact on, you know. So you could say, well, you got that mouthpiece kit. Well, yes, the mouthpiece kit is um, a mostly a diagnostic tool, and yes, I do intend eventually to use it. Sell the mouthpieces, which is really what it's for. But that's why I bought it. I bought it as a tool so that students could come in here and we could fit them with the right mouthpiece. I invested in that an investment into the students. Okay. Um, I can't see a similar reason to buy a C trumpet right now. So that's the difference between me as a pro and the ones and people who are not pro. This is what they do for fun, and if they've got $6,000 to put into a trumpet, then they should, without having to skip on some paying some bills or whatever. Then yes, I mean I'm not against that. Um, for me, it's got to be a business thing, and I don't have a business reason to get a C trumpet right now. But getting back to the point, every C trumpet I ever played on was terrible. Not a single good one ever, except for those Blackburns. I've tried two Blackburns now, and the Blackburn has my name on it. I will eventually have a Blackburn C trumpet. All right, guys. How many? Any other questions? I hope all y'all doing real good. Did you hear me say all y'all? Huh? All y'all. I've been living down south too long. Oh my. Gabriel says I play a professional C German rotary, handmade, so a very good horn, but it's harder all the same. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. There's a suspicion that I have that maybe it's harder because the overtones are off. You know how so anyone who plays trumpet, let's word it this way. Everyone who plays trumpet at a high level should know that the E's are flat, the D's are flat, the E flat's flat, the C sharp is flat, the the G above the staff is sharp, F sharp is sharp, F natural is sharp. Um, if you take that range and put it on the C trumpet, now you have notes that would have sounded on the flat side. Does that make sense? So on C trumpet, we're expecting this note to be sharp because that's how we hear it. But because it's on that other harmonic, it's flat. So we reject it. It's only a theory. I have no way to prove this, but I think some of the times the reason why we think it's so hard is because we're still hearing B flat pitches. We're still hearing the B flat tendencies in our ears, and the C trumpet doesn't match that. I think you have to get used to the fact that that note that rings out as a um, G, let's make it F sharp. Okay, F sharp on the C trumpet. I mean, F sharp on the B flat trumpet is sharp. We expect that note to be sharp. We get on the C trumpet and it's flat. So if you take a note that you're expecting to be flat, no, you're expecting it to be sharp, and then you hear flat, or vice versa, right? I think the clash is severe. What we expect and what's coming out, it can be almost a half step off. Like, in other words, more than a quarter tone off from what we expect. I'm not saying more than a quarter tone off from being in tune, more than a quarter tone off from what we expect. So this is my theory, right? We play the B flat trumpet, we play the lip slurs up and down, we play the scales. We're so used to hearing that note flat and the other note sharp. We're so used to hearing that it's become part of how we hear music. So when it switches the harmonics, especially with the trumpet timbre, I think it has, what's that word people are using? Cognitive dissonance. Right? It screws with our brains. Cardo asks, Eddie, do you like harmoniutes? I always have problems with the intonation and find them really stuffy. I'm not a big fan of mutes at all. I think the one mute I dislike the most is the harmoniute, for a few different reasons. Yes, there's a problem with the intonation. That's apparently, if you buy like $150 mute, that's not a problem, but I'm not going to buy $150 mute. Um, and and then there's the timbre is nasty. I don't like it. But even more, it's so cliche. You know. Um, Now if it's in a classical piece, it says harmony mute. That's fine. That's what the composer wanted. Jazz doesn't work like that. Jazz doesn't work like that. So when you know, last week I heard the Lincoln Center Jazz Band, and you know, people when they compliment a band, they talk about they use what's the word, euphemisms or whatever it's called. Oh, they're really awesome, right? But they don't say stuff, and part of that is because we're not trained to actually be articulate like that. We just say, "Oh, that's awesome," or "That sucks," right? We don't. But to me, I've striven my whole life because of students, right? You have to tell the student what they did good, what they did bad. So I'm very articulate when I'm surveying the successes of an ensemble or whatever. And what I heard from the Lincoln Center Jazz Band that night was a band that holds true to the tradition of jazz without just imitating. So the individual players had their freedom to be the individual player. So when I'm playing something that's by Miles, I'm probably not going to put the harmony mute in. If I'm doing Dizzy Gillespie, I'm not gonna do Dizzy Gillespie. And I like the sound of an open horn. My favorite mute is a I think the technical term for it is mica mute. It's a modified cup mute. It's got felt on the inside and a rubber. Um, Let me grab it. I'll show you what the mica mute looks like. Oh, not gonna happen. My mute bag is in the car. Sorry about that. You can look it up. Let me do a real quick search. Yeah. So I'll put a Google link so you can see what a mica mute looks like. I like that. I like a mica mute. It sounds almost wooden and hollow and um. But no, I'm not a big fan. If so, the way you're asking this, you're saying, Eddie, do you like harmony mutes? The answer for that would have to be no. I don't really like harmony mutes. Gabriel says, Eddie, there's a black cat walking after you now and then. Yeah, that's that's Vladdy. We've got four cats. Um, Siggy is the boy, Sigmund, right? Siggy, and Dory is a girl. We've got Vladdy is the black one. Is um short for so I won't go into that. So Vladdy is a little girl, and Brady is a girl. We called Brady because we couldn't figure out a name for her, and Pearl, my wife, she says it's like the Brady Bunch, so we started calling her Brady. So yes, we've got a whole house full of cats, and all the neighbor cats too, as well. If the whole neighborhood would come over here to eat our cat food. So, and you know what's interesting is they all have distinct personalities. There's a very. I'm in the process of writing a a duet suite with four movements named after each one of the cats. So the whole time during the whole Q and A, Dory has been sitting back behind my chair. I think Dory is the one that usually pops up on these things. Um, yeah. Anyway, any other questions? So I call her Dory because she's gray, and I couldn't get the name of that book out of my head, Dorian Gray. So we called her Dory. So those cats ended up, they were born in our garage. Um, and then one day, the mother cat just brought them into the house. Um, and we used to keep that we used to have 6 of these cats in the house. Um, so you could say the great uncle and the mother of these 4. Both of those are gone now. The so technically these cats are not feral because they live here, but they're all of their relatives are feral cats. Any other questions? And that's also, by the way, why we've got okay. One of my 2 dogs hates the trumpet while the other always comes to me when I practice. Hey, that's cool. That's funny. Yeah, see, that's different personalities, you know? They have different personalities just like people do. All right, anything else before we sign off? All right. Well, I guess that's it today. Um, I hope you guys have a great week. Things are starting to get busy, so um, yeah, you're welcome, Gabriel. Um, I don't I don't know yet, but we probably will have to skip a few of these coming into the season, okay? So, we'll deal with that as we go. Remember there is a WhatsApp number. You can get it in the description. And we will let you know when there is and when there's not a Q and A in the future, okay? All right. Well, God bless you guys. We'll see you next week. Have a great week.